Hi. Hello everybody. So, Duncan from Fishing Guide Scotland here again with you, and the rather noisy Hector with his beaver teeth. To fish based on your experience level. For salmon, I would definitely recommend heading to a smaller river if you're not a competent spey caster. Really, for fishing the big rivers like the Tay or the Tweed or the Spey or the Dee, you need to be able to cast a reasonable distance in order to stand the best chance of catching fish. You can catch fish without casting far, but it's going to be difficult. However, in the little rivers like the ones in Argyll, there you stand yourself a good chance of catching a fish, even if you can only cast 30 feet, 40 feet. That's quite often enough to cover fish. And with a 12 foot or 13 foot switch rod or spey rod, casting that sort of distance is very easy. Anyone can do it, even in their first hour or so of learning to spey cast. So, leave the bigger rivers for when you're a little more expert, or for experienced anglers, and go to the little rivers for when you want an easy fish. I mean, some very experienced anglers also want a relatively easy salmon, so by all means head to the little rivers as well. When it comes to trout fishing now, probably the most difficult trout fishing is for wild brown trout in the rivers. If you want to catch quality brown trout, you need quite a lot of skill and guile on most days. On some days they're wanting to take anything, so aren't very fussy, but for the most part you need to be quite tactical and technical in order to make good catches. For easier trout fishing, the lochs, which you can hike into, can provide excellent trout fishing on wet flies, using traditional Scottish wet flies, either drifting in a boat or just from the shore. If you want easier still fishing, then there's always the rainbow trout option. Now, rainbow trout are not native to Scotland, but they have been stocked into some places and they are generally easy to catch. I quite often get asked what the casting is like, so fly anglers wondering whether their casting is going to be good enough to fish in Scotland. Now, it is true that I don't know any other country in the world where people focus quite as much on distance as fly anglers in Scotland seem to. I mean, pretty much any discipline, whether it's spey fishing for salmon, still water fishing for trout, or even river fishing for trout, most anglers tend to cast quite far here. So some of our rivers are really big, and so we use big rods to punch the line out across 100 feet, 140 feet sometimes of river. 15 foot spey rods sometimes we use for the salmon fishing, especially in the big rivers. But you don't have to be an expert angler an expert caster to catch salmon, or for that matter trout. I'm a strong believer in minimising the distance between yourself and the fish, especially trout fishing, and especially in rivers. With salmon fishing, it's quite often hard to know exactly where they are, and they could take at any point in your swing, so you're just trying to cover a good amount of productive water with your cast. If you can spey cast 40 feet, which everyone can, even within an hour of teaching, if you've never done it before, you'll be able to catch salmon on the small rivers like the ones in Argyll, or some of the islands have similar rivers. To catch salmon in rivers like the Tay or the Tweed, you need a bit more distance ideally, although they can be caught on short casts. Most you definitely stand a better chance if you can cast a good bit further. For fly fishing from the boat, here people do tend to cast quite far when fishing what we call loch style, which is using traditional wets, which are sort of similar to American soft hackles, but not always. We usually fish something like a muddler on the top dropper, and then two other flies like a clan chief and a Dunkeld, just to name three completely random flies, on the middle dropper and on the point. The first fly is a sort of a wake fly. It's to produce disturbance and attract fish to the other flies. They may take the wake fly, but they may just as likely or more likely take the middle dropper, or most often you find them on the point. Yeah. So again, we tend to cast a fair bit of distance, so if you can get out there with your rod on some grass and practice casting at least 40 feet, then you'll stand yourself in better stead. When you're boat fishing, you do want to get your flies as far away from the boat as possible quite often, as long as that's within your control range. You've got to compensate that against how comfortable you are casting at distance, so instead of really pushing the distance and getting lots of tangles, it's better to stay within your comfort zone. Having said that, if you can cast 40, 50 feet, 60 or 70, great, because there is an effect of scaring fish away from the boat even without wanting to. Just little bumps and knocks will push fish away from the boat. So if you're casting 40, 50 feet, that's fine to be in the zone that isn't spooking fish, basically, that the boat isn't spooking fish. When it comes to river fishing for browns, then probably that's the scenario in which you need to not think so much about distance, but definitely think about a couple of additions to your casting style. So if you can incorporate a reach mend into your cast, then that will really help to give you a drag-free drift. And that's just as important when fishing spiders, which are really like what Americans call soft hackles, or fishing nymphs, or for fishing dry flies. For all of those, it's good to have as much of a drag-free drift as you can. Also, a bucket cast or a tuck cast is a good thing to practice, which is a kind of a cast which is overpowered on the forward cast, a really excessively hard stop, and that knocks your flies down under your fly line so that they land first and quite heavily, and that's especially useful for fishing upstream nymphs, well, nymphs, even cross-stream nymphs. If you then followed up with a big upstream mend, then that can help a lot to get a drag-free drift. You don't want to do that when you're dry fly fishing, because that would push your dry fly under the surface, which isn't what you want. But otherwise, yeah, that's what I've got to say about casting in Scotland. Anyone can do it. Come and be relaxed about learning. Fly casting is not something which responds to effort. The harder you try, often the worse it gets. So come nice and relaxed and ready to learn something new, and you'll do fine. Hector and his beaver teeth. Show them your beaver teeth. Yay!